So, this is it, ladies and gentlemen. I've reached 1,000 subscribers. This is a very big milestone for me personally. I've always said that I never thought I deserved even 100 subscribers. I personally think that the quality of my videos are not sufficient enough are not of quality enough to suffice me getting all these subscribers. I still very much appreciate it, and it brings me a certain level of joy to know that this many people like to hear me talk about cult films and exploitation films and absolute just some of the worst shit ever. And I thought to myself, well, what am I going to do for 1,000 subscribers? I could do something physically painful that would get me some attention and views. I could, like, drink a whole bottle of, like, Carolina Reaper hot sauce, or I could do something stupid like that. I could review just a specific movie that is, like, really crazy that could be something that's interesting. Then I went to Cinema Wasteland. And if you saw my update haul kind of video for it, you know I picked up a thing from Vinegar Syndrome, a box set from Vinegar Syndrome. It is the Bizarre Art Theater box set, the Bizarre Art Theater collection. And I've decided that I'm going to review all 12 films in this set. This is a collection of 12 horror and occult-themed pornographic films from the 1970s. Needless to say, the acting and writing and everything in these films is absolutely terrible, so I'm really not going to touch on that too much as I'm going to essentially explain what happens in the film and tell you whether or not it is worth a watch for some of its like unintentional hilarity, or maybe even intentional hilarity, or even maybe some of the sex scenes. So, I gotta say that right off the bat. Second, no trailers for these films exist because these films are very low budget, very obscure, very cult. They only played in like the theaters in Pittsburgh, from what I've read about this set. Let me just yeah, we journeyed to Pittsburgh to spend an eerie night at a bizarre art theater for 12 of the weirdest, wildest, and most unsettling skin flicks ever unspooled through a 16mm projector. So it's essentially, I'm essentially going to review 12 horror-themed pornos from the 70s and try my best not to fucking kill myself in watching all of these things. So yeah, needless to say, this video is going to be very not safe for work, and since there are no trailers for these films, I will be essentially for the kind of corner, like, showcase kind of filler thing that I do. I'm essentially just going to be playing trailers for 1960, like, roughy films, as well as erotic films from the 70s, sexploitation films, maybe even a kind of erotic horror film trailer here or there. I'm going to be just putting stuff like that up in the corner. And I should go ahead and say right now, these reviews are based off of my notes taken while watching these movies. I actually didn't decide whether or not I wanted to do this video until I was 4 movies into the set, so the first 4 aren't very detailed or complex as far as like talking about what happens in the films and whether or not it's worthwhile, versus the last 8, which are very detailed and very, very long and drawn out, and it's gonna be hell to record and edit this beast. But I'm doing this for you guys, I'm doing this for the fans, for people that like to see me talk about absolute garbage on my channel. This is probably the lowest I have come so far, and I've covered stuff like The Angel's Melancholy and Terror Toons 3. And this might be the actual lowest I have come so far in covering shit like this. So, God help me, this is the 1,000 subscriber special of me covering the Bizarre Art Theater collection. So let's just get this fucking thing started. Alright, to start this thing off, we have House of Desaad. This one is an attempt to be a haunted house porno that isn't as atmospheric as you might think based on the opening credits that shows this creepy old house. And it actually does kind of start out a little bit creepy. Then you get a couple fucking, you get an orgy that goes on for 40 minutes, and they suddenly get to the house with no explicable reason why they got there, and no reason why they were there in the first place, really. And they have an orgy, they summon the ghost of the Marquis de Sade, and then they have another orgy. And the film ends, and literally nothing happened. the entire runtime. The next one is the only one that I would really say is even slightly entertaining, and it's one called The Geek. This one is about a bunch of campers who go searching for Bigfoot, and one of the couples kind of strays off and they fuck, and then there's some dialogue, some sex, and it keeps going back like that, back and forth, until Bigfoot finally shows up and rapes everybody. This is literally the only moment in the film, in this entire set, that I was genuinely entertained by something. Other than that, I was bored out of my fucking mind, because the guy that they got to be Bigfoot was literally just a homeless guy with a beard and long hair, and they gave him like a gorilla Halloween costume, cut a hole in a crotch so his cock could hang out, and then painted his face and his hands black. And did I forget to mention that when he touches somebody, the paint they put on him, the makeup they put on him, actually rubs off on them? Oh yeah, and they didn't paint his dick black either, which makes no sense, considering he's supposed to be Bigfoot, but alright. The next one is an attempt at a giallo film. This one could have been something really, really fun and entertaining if they would have gone for some more interesting kind of deaths than strangulations. Essentially, this film is about an acting troupe putting on a show and somebody wants to stop it. So this is basically a giallo porno version of Phantom of the Opera. Basically, the rapist murderer who wears the classic like black hat and black outfit, but he doesn't wear the black leather gloves like you expect in a giallo. He wears like gardener's gloves, and he goes around strangling women while raping them, and it's really, really forgettable for the most part, other than the fucking ending where they finally catch the killer and he's like trying to run down the stairs with his pants around his ankles and he's kind of stumbling and tripping a bit. That's the only really entertaining moment in the entire film. Next up is Dr. Sexual and Mr. Hyde. This one is another one that could have been like a pretty interesting film had they actually tried to do something with it. Essentially a porno remake of the classic story, but instead of it being about a chemical solution that separates the good and bad parts of your brain, it separates the kind of like normal parts of your brain and your crazy fetishistic side of your brain. There's a decent attempt at making this kind of horror themed with like candles and skulls, and it looks at least kind of okay, I guess. Then the film is just orgy after orgy after orgy until Dr. Sexual fucks a character that is supposed to be a 16-year-old girl. Then another orgy, and then at the end of the film it is revealed that the solution that he and everybody else drank wasn't actually the solution he was working on. It was water that was mislabeled, and they were raving sex maniacs the whole time, and that's the twist. And then the doctor gets shot in the stomach and dies for no apparent reason, and you don't find out who did it or why. The next one is hotter than hell. This one is about the devil and his two sons sexually torturing women and trying to like prove that mankind as a whole is evil. And it starts with them torturing women, and I'll give credit where credit is due. The beginning of this film, with the sets, the costumes, and the kind of torture sequences, I felt like I wasn't watching a shitty porno, and I felt like I was actually watching like a shitty exploitation film. And it was entertaining for a minute. And then it just gets worse and worse and worse, with the devil receiving a letter basically saying his collection of souls that he's going to receive is going to be cut because they're loosening the terms a little bit on who goes to hell and who doesn't. And now it's like, as long as you're a decent person, you don't have to go to hell. So he sends his sons up to Earth to find people to prove that humans are naturally sinful, and him and his sons kind of go around and they kind of just fuck random women, and it just goes on and on and on, and they try to corrupt some virgin girl, and that takes like 10 minutes, and that happens 10 minutes from being over. They fuck some other chick, and the only real watchable parts of this film is the beginning in hell, where they're like whipping this woman that's tied to a rock, and that's kind of like reminiscent of like a normal exploitation horror film. And the fucking ending, which also takes place in hell. Also, did I forget to mention in one of the sexual torture scenes in hell, they literally shove a banana in this chick's pussy and make another chick eat it out. Yeah, that happens. What else can I say? It was bad. The next one is The Sorceress. This one is a film about. This one's like one of the worst ones on the entire set, honestly. It's a film about a woman pretending to be psychic in order to obtain money and fame. So it's like these two just random people talking about some random shit, and he says he wants to fuck a Spanish princess, and then they fuck for like 15 minutes, and she pretends to speak Spanish, and then the guy is like, hey, I have some rich banker friends. How about you pretend to be a psychic and let them act out their sexual fantasies with you while I take pictures and then I can blackmail them. And that's essentially the entirety of the film. There's a scene where there's a few sex scenes where it's obvious that it was shot without sound and they dubbed it over, and it's really obvious because they have the actress moaning into a microphone, but there are moments where the microphone's a little too close to her mouth, and you just get a like fucking breathing feedback into the microphone, and it's really fucking distracting. Uh, goddamn. There's like a 10-minute segment where I just kind of let it play while I was out of the room because had to go take a shit because I didn't care about this fucking film anymore. And when I came back, it was just as like forgettable and terrible as it was when I was watching it. Fucking, there's a lesbian scene. There's another fantasy which ends with the guy strangling the main character to death, and this one is the worst one in the fucking set. One of the worst ones in the set. It wasn't even half interesting. Other than some colorful lighting here and there, it's really, really fucking terrible and forgettable. The next one is one that could have been promising. That could be a promising, actually, like cult film comedy even. And this one was called Rites of Uranus. This one is about an evil cult, an evil satanic cult that worships the planet Uranus, and they use sodomy to get people to join. The film literally starts out with a scene straight out of Bible Black, with a chick with a lit candle stuck up her ass, while a bunch of guys in robes, and there's like fog coming out of a nearby cauldron, and these guys in robes are standing around chanting as they jerk off on her, and and then a guy eats somebody's ass, and this is just like painful to fucking watch. The cult leader tells them to bring in a new girl and teach her the ways of sodomy, and I will say the lighting and some of the absolute darkness and colorful lighting and use of spotlights and candelabras and, you know, like making the set look very, very atmospheric and otherworldly helps to make the film a little more watchable, but not by fucking much. Other than that, this film would have made a decent cult exploitation film, like similar to something like Satan's Slave, for example, if it wasn't for the long, drawn-out pornographic sequences. And the film just keeps going and going, and do you even really care how these fucking movies end anymore? The next one was a superhero one. This is another one in the set that I was actually fairly interested in watching, called Waltz of the Bat. This one is about this is a superhero porno about a super heroine called the Bee facing off against her arch enemy, the Bat, which is a guy that looks like Jack the Ripper, or a magician, or a vampire, and he kind of turns out to be a vampire, kind of. So the Bat picks up this hooker, and like the hooker breaks the fourth wall by saying, "Man, I hate picking up weirdos like this," even though she's not a main character, and she ends up getting like her life force sucked out of her, and ends up becoming a slave to the Bat. So, there's a scene with some Raggedy Ann and Andy dolls doing some stop motion sex, and that was kind of funny. The Bee, then the Bat introduces himself by lifting up his cape, by like introduces himself to the hooker by lifting up his cape like Dracula, but he's only wearing like his cape and his top hat, and his just cock's hanging out. Yeah, he starts to fuck her, and this is really getting, at this point, it was just really getting fucking old. I mean, I was never really into these films in the first place, but still, this was fucking bad. And, like, then the Bat breaks the fourth wall and explains who he is and who the Bee is, and the Bee is just like this chick who's in a cheap black and yellow sweater and like a sequin cape, who's just kind of sitting on the couch putting honey on things and eating them. And we also find out that the Bat is basically like a vampire pimp, which again would be funny and interesting in another movie, but here it is just squandered. It's kind of funny at times, I guess, with its very jumbled attempt at a plot and costumes, but the sex scenes are just too fucking long and boring, and again, I'm reviewing pornography, this shouldn't be surprising. The next one is another one that's one of the worst on the fucking set, probably, and it is a film called Cult of the Scorpion. This one is about a porno cult, a porno about a satanic cult, but this one isn't a sodomy cult, so it's not as interesting. A woman who is looking for her half-sister stumbles across a sinister sex cult that consists of people with scorpion tattoos. Now, other than the opening scene with a narration and then like 10 minutes of fucking, and that's where we get the plot. Other than that, there's no fucking plot. At the end of the movie, the plot is not resolved or anything. It is just left open. And the plot is actually never mentioned again. I'd also like to mention that there's another scene of dialogue right after this 10 minutes of straight fucking where they're so desperate to make this scene like semi-erotic, or at least like interesting to the people who I guess came to the theater to see this film for the sex, to the point that it's just a chick reading an erotic novel for this segment of dialogue. That's it. At this point, I paused the film, went out to get hot wings, and completely forgot what was going on and didn't care when I came back. At this point, it's all blending together. It was all blending together, and it was just scenes of fucking over and over and over again. And again, what can I say? It's fucking atrociously boring, and it's just useless. Next, we have Mania. This one was another one that was on the set that kind of sounded interesting. It's an attempt at a slasher film, and it's about a psychotic knife-wielding killer raping and murdering girls at a Catholic boarding school. The film opens just randomly with all these girls at the school and the headmistress saying grace, and then there's a fantasy short sex scene that one of the girls is having about one of the other girls, and this happens a few other times, and at this point, the film gives us no context whether these actually happened or whether it's a fantasy or something. So I'm guessing that these girls are lesbians and they're at a Catholic school because why not? I should also mention that during these scenes there is a really shitty instrumental cover of California Dreaming playing in the background, and I nearly lost my shit when I heard it because I was like, man, this sounds really familiar. And I listened a bit, and then I listened to California Dreaming, and I'm like, holy shit, these songs are very fucking lawsuit level similar. So this new girl arrives at the school, and the son of the headmistress is a pervert, and he has an incestuous relationship with his mother. And I mean, it's something that's unexpected that hadn't really happened in these movies yet, and there's a incestuous sex scene, which I guess is kind of interesting. This was legitimately some John Waters level kind of shit. And the movie still wasn't good and wasn't really entertaining. What there was of entertaining stuff with that kind of incest subplot, it just dies quickly. It gets tiresome after a bit, and there's even more fucking, and halfway through the film, the killer finally shows up, and all the kills except for one are bloodless, and they're all really boring with the kills, with most of them taking place off screen. What started off semi-promising, even up to the incest subplot, which was kind of interesting, fizzled out sadly. Okay, we're on to On to the last couple. I'm fucking dying here. This is yet another film, Daughters of Darkness, about a cult. This isn't the lesbian vampire film Daughters of Darkness. I haven't seen it, but I know that film exists. This is another one about a satanic cult who run a boarding house, and this guy who's a writer moves in, and the film starts logically with the main character arriving and, showing up and working on his novel, and then we get a look at one of his like fellow boarders at the boarding house is doing, and she's laying there with her cat on her chest naked, and she's trying to get her cat to like lick her nipple, and then her cat turns into a woman, and then there's a lesbian sex scene. I'm not gonna lie, that scene was very, very, very unexpected and chuckle worthy, but again, the laughs end quickly, and the existential dread sets in just as quick. The next morning, the guy wakes up, and he's being like, his fellow boarder is like bringing him food, and they fuck, and then this chick has this huge tattoo of Satan like on her stomach down, and so when the guy is like eating her out, it looks like he's making out with this Satan tattoo. That was something that was a little funny that was in the film, but other than that, there wasn't much going on there. Some stuff is mentioned. There's a scene like in a foggy cemetery, and this excuse for the plot still makes me fail to care about it. There's a scene that I think was filmed on a public beach, and as I was sitting there watching it, I legitimately wondered to myself, did they get caught, and did they get a fine for this? And I really fucking hope they got caught and got fined for this shit, because this is awful. That scene only existed as filler to explain why this chick has a tattoo on her chest. And then, we get back to it, and the writer, like, gets mad because everybody's, like, fucking in the house. And then we get people sucking each other's toes in the bathtub. At this point, I wanted to fucking die. That was the worst fucking thing in this entire film. And, again, the writer gets mad, but it goes nowhere. And some time passes, and I had to take a piss and get something to drink, so I left with the movie playing for like 5 minutes. And that 5 minutes is undocumented of what happened in the plot, because there was no reason for me to care at that point. Ugh, God. So they hypnotize the writer and kind of kidnap him, and then at the end there's this huge satanic ritual that's half decent and kind of interesting. Like, it's a decent set. It's better than just the random apartment set or the fucking public beach that we've seen in the film multiple times already. So at least there's something different to look at. And it's like a dark room with like inverted crosses and altars and a giant spider web for some reason. I don't know. Finally, fucking-ly, we are on to the last movie. Unholy Child. Unholy Child is a weird name for a porno, I would argue. But I can roll with it. This is a film about a sailor who returns home to San Francisco after spending some time at sea in the Navy, and he discovers that he's being stalked by a serial killer who wants to kill him. That doesn't sound like the kind of movie a title like The Unholy Child would have, but whatever. There's some fucking. The sailor, like, talks to his sister for a bit, and at that point I'd given up on taking notes because I just wanted to fucking die because I knew it was the last one in the set. Also, it isn't even that much of a horror film, so who cares? I just wanted to this all to be over. In conclusion, I just want to make sure okay, yeah. In conclusion, there's nothing to recommend about this bizarre art theater collection. I can't even recommend it as, like, actual pornography. The shitty, unrestored version of Manos the Hands of Fate is more fun and watchable than this. I would rather watch Melancholy der Engel for 12 hours straight than watch this. Because at least Melancholy der Engel is well shot. It looks nice. Even if I don't like that movie. But still, I'd rather watch this entire set over again than even go near Terror Toons 3. And that's saying something. Anyway, guys, this concludes the kind of mega 12-film review of the Bizarre Art Theater collection, which consisted of titles here: House of Desaad, The Geek, Come Deadly, Dr. Sexual Mr Hyde, Hotter Than Hell, The Sorceress, Rights of Uranus, Waltz of the Bat, Cult of the Scorpion, Mania, Daughters of Darkness, and The Unholy Child. This was the 1,000 subscriber special, and I sat through 12 whole hours of really terrible occult and horror themed pornography. For you guys. I suffered for 12 hours straight. For the fans. For the people who think that my content is actually decent. For the people who care. You know, I don't think I produce good content, and to think that there are 1,000 of you out there who follow my channel and who think that I produce good enough content for me to be in your subscriber feed, it honestly just makes me feel very happy. It makes me feel like me being a cult film fan, being somebody who watches terrible fucking movies like these. It makes me feel appreciated more than I usually feel when I try to talk about these kinds of things with normal people. Anyway, guys, this is Biscuit Boo Horror Reviews, celebrating 1,000 subscribers, and maybe in a few years another 1,000. Only time will tell, you know. Signing off.